problem they're having with heroin. As soon as they arrest a whole bunch of people, there's always new people popping up and selling and trafficking the drug. So again, it doesn't matter what they do when they can't even win the battle on the street level. And we already know this from the heroin and opioid um, plague that's going on. But please tell me what you think in the comment section. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.
Report that just came out on CNN Money. The opioid crisis is draining America of workers. And this goes back to the video I did on how many people are now failing drug tests. I never thought I would see the day in this country where most of the applicants would fail a drug test and only a handful here and there will pass. But that's what's happening now, especially in towns that have a high population of Caucasoids. They'll come in, fill out the job application, and just keep failing over and over and over. And this is kept silent. This is kept silent, and this is happening primarily among the Caucasoids. They cannot pass a drug test for employment, and it's serious. So serious that many companies are now turning to the Syrian refugees and immigrants coming to this country from Africa. And they're putting them to work because these people can pass a drug test. Where Americans, which they know they're talking about their own people, can't even pass. And a new problem has also cropped up. People that were former drug addicts, did drugs at one time, no longer do drugs, are also having a hard time finding work because people are afraid. These companies out here are afraid to take a chance on them falling off the bandwagon. So you're going to hear more and more former junkies that beat their drug habit, at least for now they did, say they still can't find work. Once people look in their background and see that they had a drug addiction, they won't hire them. So if you had a drug addiction, you better keep it quiet, because if people get wind of it when you're trying to look for work, or you've had some arrest and it was due to your drug addiction, you may have a hard time finding work. No one will want to touch you. So the opioid abuse is also hurting America's job market. The use of opioid has become a factor in why prime age workers, mostly men, are unable or unwilling to find work, according to a new report by Goldman Sachs. Okay, so it's just talking about the Labor Department data that has recently came out, and it shows a shrinking labor force, which is really going to take a major hit on the economy. See, this heroin addiction is going to impact everything. It has a domino effect because you have primarily Caucasoids on the drugs. And they were really the biggest job holders in the country. Now that's all changing. That's all changing, which means economically you're going to bring in the immigrant and pay them less. So although they're making an income in the American economy, they have less to spend because they're not making as much as the white worker would have made. So now the Labor Department participant rate for American men between the ages of 25 and 54 has fallen 10% since its peak in 1954. It currently stands at 88.4, slightly higher than an all-time low of 87.9 in 2014. In addition to opioid abuse, factors such as technology and aging population and globalization have also contributed to the declining participation of working age adults in the labor market. But the ballooning use of opioid, whether it is prescription drugs or heroin is preventing many workers from coming back into the job market, economists argue. Well, there's not very much you can do about that unless you change the labor laws. If you're not willing to do that, a lot of these people are going to be sitting around with no jobs, just like they are now. Boy, I never thought I would see the day where white people would have a hard time hiring their own people because of drug use. Woo, things have changed. The opioid epidemic is intertwined with the story of declining prime age participation, especially for men, says Goldman economist David Muracle. The crisis has created significant costs both to employers and the public sector. All right. So, it's just talking about Ohio blaming the pharmaceutical company for the epidemic and things we've heard before. But there's a video up here. I'm going to go ahead and play this video on how this company in Erie, Pennsylvania could not find workers among their population up there and had to bring in all immigrants to work in their manufacturing company.
Where'd Adam go? This is Ollie. Ollie, he's from Syria.
Hi, how are you? Salam. Salam alaikum.
Sterling Technologies in Erie, Pennsylvania is an American company that needs workers, but has had trouble filling the jobs because local residents are failing drug tests.
I would say we've probably had 20% every time we run a random test. 20% of the people are failing.
It's pretty high.
Yeah, it's pretty high. We're seeing positive tests anywhere from marijuana through amphetamines, right all the way through crystal meth and heroin.
And it's not just here. The percent of employees in the U.S. testing positive for drugs has increased steadily over the last 3 years, reaching the highest level in a decade.
So how many people here are refugees?
Almost everybody that you're seeing here.
At Sterling, refugees have become a hiring solution to the drug problem.
The immigrant workforce that's here has filled a void that we were unable to fill with our local labor pool that we were drawing from.
It's a dynamic that can be seen in many parts of the country, from upstate New York to Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. But some companies that work with refugees in these places don't want to talk about it.
They don't want to admit that there is a problem when it comes to drug testing, and refugees are filling that void.
With President Trump's executive order putting a temporary ban on refugees and so much talk about the lack of jobs in the Rust Belt, businesses are in a tough spot, especially when they're in need of drug-free workers like Talib Azamel, a refugee from Syria who arrived to Erie, Pennsylvania last summer. Within 3 months, he got a job at the factory.
احنا بالنسبه لحياتنا يعني ما نعرفش المخدرات ما نعرفش حتى شلون صورتها او شلون تتعاطى الكحول نفس العمليه احنا ما بنشربش يعني انا عمري 45 سنه حياتي ما شربت كحول كمان ولا مره يعني.
In terms of business, how important are refugees to a city like Erie?
I think they're extremely important. I mean, they're the one growing group in the city. It's a city that's been on decline with their population, so it's the only growing group.
The refugees in Erie have arrived to a city struggling economically and dealing with a drug epidemic.
Would you like to be a teacher again in America? The reality is when business owners are telling you that they can't find native residents who will do these jobs, or they can't find enough people in the community to pass a drug test, what are they to do? They need to seek out employees somewhere. And for now, immigrants are a really good source of that labor.
She's from Cuba, and that man's from Syria, United States, Indonesia, Vietnam, 5 countries in this one room right here, yes.
In Louisville, Kentucky, nearly 6,000 refugees have arrived in the last 5 years, helping companies fill jobs.
When we work with, for instance, Kentucky Refugee Ministries, we haven't had any troubles at all with drug testing.
So refugees really are filling that gap for you.
Yeah, in this instance, there were refugees who were available, who were ready to contribute, and we were thrilled to be able to give them that opportunity.
What size? Can you check what size you have? We are going to get you some shoes, okay? Okay, good luck tomorrow. Okay. Send us as many as you can. I hear this every single day, whether it's a small local restaurant, coffee shop to Amazon. We get flyers, we get emails, phone calls. We need people. Okay? What do we remember about work shifts?
We usually get someone employed within 3 days. We've had someone start within 1 day. That's how fast refugees are able to get employed. So the refugees are not taking the jobs. The refugees are filling the gaps.
We spoke with locals about the struggle to find jobs because of drugs.
Right now, heroin and meth is one of the biggest problems.
Recently in Louisville, there were 151 overdose calls in just 4 days. And methamphetamine use is so high here, the number of people testing positive for job drug tests is 47% higher than the national average.
I did crack cocaine and heroin. After trying to get jobs and lose jobs, get a job and lose a job, I said, might as well not try, because I'm pretty sure people want to keep their job. It's just not knowing how to stop.
In Erie, Pennsylvania, we hear similar stories.
I'm 36, and my drug of choice was heroin.
What kind of jobs were you looking for in Erie that you couldn't get?
Like retail, either like small corner stores, any stores like that. They don't give someone like me, they wouldn't give me the opportunity. You know, they just see my background, and that's all they see. They don't see me as a person.
I mean, what do you think of the fact that for these employers, they've had to go to new workers because of the drug problem?
I understand completely. I mean, those refugees, they come here with the American dream in their mind. You know, they come to work, come to build their life. You know, they obviously work hard compared to a drug-addicted individual that just scrapes by, does the bare minimum to get by every day. So I completely understand with the business owners.
I know that refugees need an opportunity when they come here, and employers give them the opportunity. But people like us that live here also need an opportunity. And I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but we deserve it as well.
You know what it is. I'm going to stop it right there, but I will leave the link to this in the description box if anybody wants to see it. See, the drug addicts and former drug addicts, the recovered ones, now got that same stigma on them like prisoners do when they get out and that background check is ran, and if they had any drug arrest or any addictions and stuff on their record, they don't get hired now. They don't want junkies. They don't want former junkies either. So a lot of these people are just as screwed as the ones that get out of jail and can't find work. So ultimately, you're going to have a large population of people out here with no jobs. And you notice how Trump promised all these jobs? Yeah, well, there may be some jobs, but they're going to the immigrants. They sure aren't going to these people, and these are white people. Okay, these addicts, many of them are white, and they cannot get employed now. Like I said before, I never thought I would live to see the day where so many caucasoids are unemployable. Now, they know what it was like for Black people. Black people have always had the highest unemployment, and they didn't care. They didn't care. Now they're experiencing it. And I have to tell you, I don't feel bad for them. They have done Black people like this since we've been in this country, since we've been here. They have always made sure unemployment always was highest among Black people than anyone else. Now the tide is turning, ladies and gentlemen. Things are changing so fast in this country. You know, this Caucasoid man, woman, and child, they are really losing their status, their make-believe status of being the best thing since apple pie in this country. But it doesn't look that way anymore. They are definitely a fallen people, more and more each day. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, everybody. You know, this is one thing that makes me laugh. The Caucasoid is always telling us Black folks that we got low IQs. But when you see the things they do and realize they can't catch on to things too quickly, I wonder, do they often look in the mirror and say, maybe I got a low IQ? You know, the IQ test is biased, it's dumb. And every time you mention it, you sound like an idiot. So let's see how where the high IQs are going with this. Opioid prescriptions fall, but still high, CBC. You know why? Because, see, the people that don't get the prescriptions just goes to the alternative market, which is your black market drugs out on the street. They don't need your scripts. What part of that don't you understand? The epidemic is still going strong, and these doctors are not writing as many scripts. What does that tell you? That means that the average junkie is now going to street drugs. They don't need the doctor's script. This is why the epidemic is not slowing down, high IQ. My goodness. And length of prescriptions went up, raising risk of addiction among patients. And this came out on July 6th on WebMD. Prescriptions for opioid painkillers have dropped since 2010 in the United States, but the number of Americans getting the highly addictive medication is still too high, a new report says. Prescription declines from a peak of 782 morphine milligrams equivalent per person in 2010 to 640 morphine milligram equivalents per person in 2015, according to researchers from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Half of U.S. counties saw a decrease in the amount of opioids prescribed per person from 2010 to 2015, said CDC acting director Ann Shuchat. Overall, opioid prescribing in the United States is down 18% since 2010, but the amount of opioids prescribed in 2015 was still about 3 times that of 1999, the Center for Disease Control researchers said, with many people being provided lengthy prescriptions of the narcotic at high doses. All right. And you know what makes me laugh? This reminds me of the last time I was on opioids after having some surgery done. And I got a 7-day supply. And this is what the doctor told me. That's all I'm allowed to give. You know, he said, by law, we're just allowed to give you 7 days. And then when I went back to work, around that same time, it was another woman in my office that had a surgical procedure done. When I pulled out my bottle of oxycodone and she pulled out hers, we had the same medication. I had this little amber bottle with a 7-day supply. She pulled out this mega sized bottle. I kid you not. She probably had the same drug with about 30 days supply in it. So then I knew they prescribed the Cockazoid a lot more of the medication than us. I only got 1 week. She had like a 30-day supply. But this doctor lied to me and said by law they were only allowed to give 7 days. But I kind of chuckle at it now that I see the epidemic going on. You know, he did me a real favor because I never got hooked on that mess. We're still seeing too many get too much for too long. The amount of opioid prescribed in 2015 was enough for every American to be medicated around the clock for 3 weeks. Drug overdoses account for just over 52,400 deaths in 2015, and nearly 2 of 3 overdoses involved an opioid, according to the CDC. Now, I'm not surprised that they give medication out like that, because you got to understand the doctors get money for every prescription they write from the pharmaceutical company. So the more they push the drug, the more money they get from those drugs. Again, their biggest money comes from writing prescriptions. It does not come from you walking in for your doctor visit. It's the prescription. That's where the money is. Prescriptions are still providing high doses of opioid painkillers such as OxyContin for periods long enough to turn patients into addicts. People are being handed opioid prescriptions that cover longer periods of time, increasing an average 13 days in 2006 to almost 18 days in 2015, the report found. Anyone taking opioids can become addicted to them after taking them just a few days. A person becomes more likely to take them long term. I don't know about that. I don't think when I took mine, I don't recall becoming addicted or craving for it. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I just didn't feel that way. Taking even a low dose of opioids for more than 3 months increases the risk of addiction by 15 times. Patients are being prescribed dangerously high levels of opioids, even though the average daily dose prescription decrease by 58 mme in 2010 and 48 mme in 2015. So it looks like they decreased the strength of the drug, but people are still addicted to it. It did not make any difference. But I do know, just from reading articles, a lot of people are now turning to the synthetic opioids and the fentanyl now. They're not even sweating the fact that they can't get the script from their doctor anymore. Number two, if you want a lot of this stuff, you can get it from the black market. If you go onto the black internet, you can get all of this stuff you want. And not only that, if you get it from China, China will ship this stuff right to your house. They don't care. And they're getting away with it big time. And the US still have not figured out a way to stop all these packages from coming over from China, because it's not like your dogs can sniff it out. Your dogs are pretty much useless when it comes down to sniffing out fentanyl. They can't. So I'm afraid to let the US know you are stuck with this epidemic, this plague. You are stuck with it. It ain't going nowhere. I don't care how much they decrease these scripts, how much they decrease the dosage, how much they're careful about giving 13 days instead of 18 days. It's not going to make any difference when you got so much illegal drugs coming into the country. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. And I'll also have the link to this article in the description box. Peace, family. All right, this story just came out on July 3rd. More Americans are in treatment for opioids, but plague keeps growing. More and more people are being treated for opioid addiction, according to 2 new reports, but not nearly enough to slow the plague down. Medicaid spending on several prescription medicines used to treat opioid addiction more than doubled nationwide in the last 5 years, accelerating between 2015 and 2016. An Urban Institute analysis of federal data found the vast majority of the money was spent in states such as Pennsylvania and New Jersey that opted into the Affordable Care Act Medicaid expansion. Republican proposals in both the Senate and House would roll back the expansion, but drug treatment spending has emerged as a possible area of compromise, especially for senators in states devastated by addiction. A separate report from the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association found a nearly 400% increase in diagnosis of opioid use disorder in the last 5 years. Both analyses were released last week. Blue companies across the nation collectively cover 106 million people, the single largest chunk of commercial health insurance. But addiction hits the poor especially hard, and the federal government has turned out to be a critical source of funding for treatment. Much of it covered by Affordable Care Act Medicaid expansion. The Blues report also looked at links between opioid prescriptions and use disorders. It found that people who receive high doses of prescription pain medicines, the equivalent of more than 65 milligrams of oxycodone or 100 milligrams of hydrocodone a day, were more likely to end up addicted even when the prescriptions was less than 90 days. I have never had a prescription for 90 days when I was on those pills. I don't think I had anything beyond 7 days. Only 7% of the prescription regimens in the report were for high doses, but those patients were up to 43 times more likely to be diagnosed with an addiction disorder than patients filling scripts for lower doses. The Blues data also show that women of all ages were more likely to be prescribed opioids than men, with the biggest gap among middle-aged patients. But men were more likely to be diagnosed with an opioid use disorder through their mid-40s. Among people older than that, however, women were more likely to run into trouble. Blues subscribers in New Jersey and Pennsylvania were below the national average on 3 measures of opioid use and diagnosed use disorder. Yet members in both states who got treatment were more likely to receive medication that have been shown to reduce the chances of relapse. Rates of opioid use were highest in the Southeast and in Appalachia. The Blues report found while the use of medicine that helped people stay off drugs was lowest in those regions. The Urban Institute report focused on Medicaid coverage of medications used to treat opioid use disorder or reverse overdose, but it contained no data at all on methadone maintenance, which is regulated separately from all other drugs. Medicaid spending, all right, let me just go down a little. All right, here we go. The report included spending on emergency overdose reversal medication, naloxone, including the brand name spray Narcan, which New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and many other states have made widely available as a lifesaver over the last few years. Medicaid spending on that was up 900 times nationwide. Democrats, moderate Republicans, and a united front of medical organizations have grown increasingly alarmed about the potential impact on addiction treatment and overdose deaths if the Medicaid expansion is rolled back, as outlined in both the Senate and House health care plans. The Wolf administration has estimated that 1/5 of the more than 700,000 Pennsylvanians who have gained coverage through the expansion have used it for substance abuse treatment. According to the Congressional Budget Office, spending on Medicaid in 2 decades would be about 1/3 lower than it is now if the Senate GOP plan were to take effect. That proposal from Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had included $2 billion over 10 years specifically for the opioid plague. By the time senators left for a 10-day holiday break, he reportedly had agreed to moderates' demands for $45 billion. But estimates of the cost of treating Medicaid patients with opioid addiction and disease that can help spread, such as hepatitis C, go as high as $183 billion over the next decade. The trajectory is unknown, says Lisa Clemens Cope, a health economist and co-author of the Urban Institute report. Clearly, treatment is not keeping up with need, even given these big increases. Cutting Medicaid, she said, could have really devastating effects for families and communities and states. Well, I guess pretty soon we should know the outcome of what Trump care is going to be like. And these people are scared. They are scared and they're desperate, and they know if Trump cut a lot of money out of Medicaid, you can wave goodbye to a lot of these junkies. They're not going to make it. And it's not going to be enough funding for states to keep treating these people. So that's a problem. This is why so many of them are putting up a fight over, what the outcome is going to be as far as Trump's healthcare bill. So I'll keep you updated. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Well, it seems to be happening, everybody. A lot of different communities around the country are now complaining they do not have enough funding to keep a stockpile of Narcan available. And Baltimore is one of the cities that only have like 4,000 doses of Narcan left, and they're not even going to be able to get funding for more until May of next year. And this is really critical because Trump is talking about all kinds of budget cuts, and most of these communities around the country may not even have enough Narcan for the estimated number of heroin addicts that they have in their city. And this goes to show you how heavily they depend on Narcan to counteract the effects of the opioids. So it has gotten to the point where all of these communities around the country are overly concerned about funding to pay for the Narcan. And pharmacies having the Narcan, from what I'm understanding after reading the article, is optional. If they want to stock it, they can. If they don't, it's really not mandatory that any of your CVS or Walgreens or Rite Aids have Narcan available. All right. So it's a big concern. And now they're talking about how Narcan is now $2,000 to $4,500 per dose. Boy, I tell you, these pharmaceutical companies are really price gouging everybody. So now they're trying to figure out how they're going to ration out these last few doses they have. Now, for instance, in Baltimore, they have 21,000 heroin addicts that they're aware of. But right now, they only have 4,000 doses of Narcan left. And they said they know probably by the end of July, they're going to be completely out of Narcan if they're not able to get more funding. So they're spending a fortune on this drug addiction. They are spending a fortune. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And of course, everybody is overly concerned about this healthcare bill that's about to come out of the Senate any day now. And it will determine whether it's going to help, which it probably won't, because Trump is talking about all these cuts. And all Trump is doing now is running his mouth about helping the addicts. He hasn't done not one damn thing to help a single drug addict in America. Not one thing. Not one thing. And the only thing he did was bring the families there to the White House, just like he did the HBCUs, and did a photo op with them, and then went in there and started cutting all kinds of programs that a lot of these drug addicts depend on, especially through the Medicaid. So he's not really interested in helping anybody. So here's a video. We're going to go ahead and listen to this video.
Makes life worth living, but sometimes life has a plan we can't always see. At South Jersey Radiology, we see what others cannot. The tri-state area's only American College of Radiology Diagnostic Imaging Center of Excellence, SJRA, exceeds state-of-the-art standards for lowest costs, best value, more convenient locations, and care that surpasses university-affiliated imaging practices. Choose SJRA. Get back to living. South Jersey Radiology. Innovative imaging. Radiology reimagined.
And tonight, while we are all watching the fireworks and enjoying them, police will be watching for any threats. Security particularly tight here.
Okay, that's not what I was. That's not what I want to see. All right, hold on. Let me see. All right, let's try it now.
When your doctor prescribes a medical imaging procedure, trust in the doctors and technologists at South Jersey Radiology, because we see what others cannot. The tri-state area's only American College of Radiology Diagnostic Imaging Center of Excellence, SJRA, exceeds state-of-the-art standards. We have more convenient locations with care that surpasses university-affiliated imaging practices. For the best value and lower costs, choose SJRA. Get back to living. South Jersey Radiology. Innovative imaging. Radiology reimagined.
78 people die each day from opioid overdoses. There's a quick-acting antidote to save them called Narcan. This treatment, also known by the generic name naloxone, works in about 5 minutes, but it needs to be administered right away to work. Brain damage can happen in just a few minutes from lack of oxygen. Here's how it works. Narcan knocks out the opioids from the opiate receptors in the brain for 30 to 90 minutes. The victim starts to breathe normally again, and emergency crews can wake and treat them. Narcan blocks a person's high from illegal drugs like heroin and fentanyl, and prescriptions like oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, and morphine. By the end of 2016, 1,214 law enforcement departments had naloxone programs. The CDC study finds in 83% of cases, Narcan is administered by other drug users on the scene. It's available as a nasal spray, which costs about $63. It could also be injected into the muscle of the arm, thigh, or butt. The injectable version starts at $15. The drug was first FDA approved in 1971, and the CDC says it has saved more than 10,000 lives between 1996 and 2010. A study in the BMJ shows the drug could cut the overdose death rate by 50%.
Okay. So if nothing changed, a lot of these cities and communities will be running out of Narcan. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Okay, y'all. This is a report that came out of CBS in Pittsburgh. The coroners have seen synthetic opiates like fentanyl mixed with marijuana. Now, in my personal opinion, I think this is from marijuana being sold on the black market. Now, I could be wrong, but this is what I'm thinking, because I don't think the norm going out on the street or buying your marijuana from certain dealers, I don't really think it's them. I really think these are synthetic opioids because, fentanyl and all types of synthetic opioids are heavily sold on the black market. And I think that's where this marijuana is coming from that's laced with fentanyl. So but you can tell me what you think in the comment section. I think as long as you're not buying it from the black market, you should be okay with the marijuana out here. So let's get into this story. Synthetic opiates like fentanyl have been found in marijuana, an Ohio coroner said Monday. Fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine, has been attributed to the increasing number of fatal overdoses across the U.S. The drug has been found in other drugs across the country, most notably in Ohio. We have seen fentanyl mixed with cocaine, and that is, y'all, I'm telling you, I live in New Jersey, and I can tell you up in New York, they are dropping like flies. The cocaine users, they're dying because apparently they're being sold cocaine with fentanyl, and these dealers are not telling them fentanyl is in it. So when they go to snort it, they are overdosing, and in many cases, they are dying. The problem is really bad in New York. We have seen fentanyl mixed with cocaine. We have also seen fentanyl mixed with marijuana, said Hamilton County Coroner Dr. Lampme Sam Marco during a joint press conference with Senator Bob Portman, Republican, Ohio. About 300 deaths have already been attributed to suspected opioid overdoses in Hamilton County this year, compared to 403 confirmed deaths through 2016, Sam Marco said. But the Hamilton County Coroner's Office has yet to report any deaths related to fentanyl-laced marijuana. It's nearly impossible to determine which drugs are laced with a synthetic opiate, Sam Marco said. Essentially, the message we've tried to get out there is if you are using any form of street drug, count on them having some form of synthetic opioid mixed in, she said. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration spokesman Melvin Patterson said the agency has not confirmed the existence of fentanyl in marijuana. In regards to marijuana, I'm not familiar with that, he told Cincinnati Enquirer. There could be. The Ohio Coroner's Office in Montgomery County previously ran out of space for dead bodies twice this year due to the opioid plague. A record of 3,050 Ohio residents died from the fatal overdoses last year, most of which were caused by heroin or painkillers. Tell me what you think. Personally, like I said, I believe this is black market marijuana that people are buying, and it's laced with fentanyl. But you just tell me what you think. I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
Deaths from prescription painkillers have more than quadrupled since 1999, according to the Centers for Disease Control.
Health reporter Stephanie Stahl is here now with what experts say could help lessen the opioid addiction.
That's right, guys. 91 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose, according to the CDC. Doctors are looking at alternatives to addictive prescriptions for treating pain. And with medical marijuana legal in many states now, advocates say legalizing it across the country could help curb the nation's drug crisis.
Christine Stenquist suffered through a brain tumor, fibromyalgia, and debilitating headaches, chronic pain, which led to 45 different prescription drugs.
Migraines were just constant.
So they started me on a lot of pharmaceuticals, and that went on for about 16 years.
Between the pain and the opioids, the mother of four was left bedridden. Eventually, she decided to give medical marijuana a try.
This is just a whole different lifestyle. I'm eating healthier, I'm more active, more alert.
Stenquist is one of a growing number of Americans who've traded in their powerful and addictive painkillers for the green alternative. Research in the Journal of the American Medical Association shows in states where medical marijuana is legal, opioid overdose deaths are down as much as 25%. The DEA still warns of a high potential for abuse, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions has described marijuana as only slightly less harmful than heroin.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana.
But Carla Rosati Vasquez treats pain patients and disagrees.
I've had patients that since they have been using their vaporizers with cannabis, for example, they've decreased their use in Ambien, they've decreased their use on clonazepam, on Percocet.
Within 6 months, I was driving. Within 8 months, I was trying to figure out how to pass a law in my state.
Stenquist knows in her home state of Utah, that could be an uphill battle. Now, medical cannabis is legal in 29 states, including here in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Those programs provide access to patients with a legally approved serious medical condition, and they have to have a prescription.
Okay. Tell me what you think in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. I personally, like I said, I think this is
just an hour south of Pittsburgh in the Laurel.
That won't even turn off. Okay, just tell me what you think in the comments section, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, everyone. You know, I had a troll come to me recently and said, why don't I talk more about black-on-black crime? Because black-on-black crime is not the leading problem in America. Although you caucasoids in your propaganda machine, the mainstream media, try to make it appear that way. But some of us that are way, way more awakened and we are aware of what's going on in America, you're not going to pull that one over on us. So if you need to hear about black-on-black crime, I suggest you go to another channel. On this channel, we are going to focus on what the biggest problem is in America, and that is your opioid plague. Not only is it a problem, ladies and gentlemen, in America, it is the biggest drug problem on earth. America leads the world in drug overdose deaths by a lot. And this article came out on Vox.com, June 28th, 2017. America has about 4% of the world's population, but 27% of the world drug overdose deaths. That, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty sad. America has the biggest drug overdose deaths in the entire planet. And these are mostly caucasoids. Black people are not leading in drug deaths in America. Not even close. We're not even close to you. Although you're trying to make the 4% of the black people that are on opioids a big deal, but we know that's not a big deal. Your deaths have far exceeded that. That's one of the startling conclusions from a recent report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Statista charted the results, and as you can clearly see, the U.S. is in the lead. North America, so this now filters in Canada because the caucasoids up in Canada are also having a problem. And as you can see, all the way down the chart. Do you know South Africa is also having an opioid problem, ladies and gentlemen? They deserve it. They deserve it. Okay. The U.S. has always been ahead of much of the world in drug overdose deaths for a variety of reasons. For one, Americans are relatively wealthy, so they can afford to buy drugs. But there's also appears to be a cultural and socioeconomic factors at play, driving a broader increase in deaths of despair, such as suicides, alcohol, drug overdose deaths in recent years. And we know all this stuff. Oh, jobs went overseas, poor healthcare access, that kind of stuff. We already know that. But recently, America has gotten much worse in its massive opioid plague, which has contributed to a huge spike in drug overdose deaths over the past decades. In 1999, fewer than 17,000 people died from drug overdoses. In 2015, that grew to more than 52,000 people. This is why I don't talk about black-on-black crime, because black-on-black crime is not the problem in America. It is the Caucasoids on drugs is your biggest problem in America. Not only are you the biggest junkies, you are the biggest nuisance out in society. Your drug addicts are causing all kinds of car accidents. They have killed people out on the road. They have injured people. They have jumped the curb and ran people over. Your junkies are robbing pharmacies. They're robbing banks. They're robbing people's homes. So you're not just being a drug addict, but being harmless to everybody. You are being a complete nuisance and also a killer as a junkie. That's the problem, not black-on-black crime. This is, for now, largely a white American problem. Okay, I'm going to throw it in there because that's what it is. After pharmaceutical companies heavily market their opioids in the US and doctors followed through with massive numbers of prescriptions, America became the world's leader in consuming opioids, with UN data putting the US at the top of the opioid consumption. And as you can see in the dark blue on top, America just trumps all other countries on earth when it comes down to drug overdose deaths, including Canada. Canada's right behind because they're part of North America. The same drugs that are being trafficked into America is being brought into Canada as well. Okay, these folks have no right to talk to any black person about black-on-black crime or this fabricated black-on-white crime and all this other stuff that you could try to put on the black community. Okay, calling us niggers is not the worst thing that can happen, but your drug deaths are certainly far worse than being called a nigger, okay? So all of your little bags of tricks that you got is just simply not going to work. And I laugh because, see, these Caucasoids are also upset because the world don't like them like they used to. Not only are they taking a lot of criticism here in America, they're taking a lot of criticism outside of America. They're getting called out on a lot of things. And they are so fragile. They are upset that the world just don't love them like they used to. And it serves them right. What have you done to deserve to be loved by everybody? Not a damn thing. So what you're getting, you deserve every ounce of it. Okay, America leading the entire globe in drug deaths, ladies and gentlemen. Pass it on, ladies and gentlemen, pass it on. But don't let them get in your face again with no black on black crime. That's not leading in anything in America. I don't care how much they keep trying to fake it up on their media. All right, the two charts then are closely tied as America consume more opioids and the drug overdose deaths climb. So it began to dominate the world on a very grim statistic. Okay, so in 2015, Americans died of drug overdoses more on that year than, any other time, which was 52,000 deaths. And that same year, there were 38,000 people that died in car crashes, 36 died from gun violence, 36,000 died from gun violence, and 43,000 and HIV/AIDS during the epidemic's peak in 1995. So they have far exceeded any black on black crimes that another black person died at the hands of a black person. Black on black crime deaths have pretty much been leveled for the past few decades. The last time I looked, it was like 4,300 black people died at the hands of another black person. And they got the nerve to make a big deal out of that when 52,000 of them died in 2015. And they got the nerve to come and talk about some black on black crime. These people are a joke. They are so stupid. This is the latest drug plague, however, is not solely about illegal drugs. It began, in fact, with a legal drug. And we know that the doctors prescribing the opioids, and then they turn from that to the heroin and the fentanyl out on the street. We know that. That's like old news for people on my channel. Painkillers proliferated, landing in the hands of just not patients, but teens rummaging through their parents' medicine cabinet. You know what? When I was a teenager and my parents were on medicine, because I had both my mom and dad in the house. I didn't grow up in a single family home that a lot of you caucasoids also try to imply by black people. We all have fathers, okay? We couldn't have got here without a father. I never thought of rummaging through any medicine cabinet looking for drugs to take. I just never did that as a teenager. In fact, I hardly wanted to take a pill. Okay, I was not one of those people I barely want to take one now. I would prefer to use a natural remedy over taking a whole bunch of pills from a doctor. So that's their teens doing that. I don't believe it's a lot of black teens doing that kind of stuff. Other family members and friends of patients and the black market. As a result, opioid overdose deaths trend upwards, sometimes involving opioids alone, other times involving drugs like alcohol, benzodiazepines. By 2015, opioid overdose death totaled more than 33,000. Close to 2/3 of all drug overdose deaths. And you can see on this chart from New York Times how it's trend upward. And they're now projecting that 65,000 people have died from drug overdose deaths in 2016, but those numbers will not be out until December. Seeing the rise in opioid misuse and death, officials have cracked down on prescription painkillers. Law enforcement, for instance, threatened doctors with incarceration and the loss of their medical license if they prescribe drugs. Yeah, well, we've seen this already. I already did a story on was a woman doctor, a white female doctor, and she got arrested for writing all types of scripts for opioids for people that didn't even need them. So we have seen this already, and she lost her license. Okay, ideally, doctors should still be able to get painkillers to patients who truly need them. After, for example, evaluating whether the patient has a lot of history of drug addiction. But doctors who weren't conducting even such basic checks are now being told to give more thought to their prescriptions. Yet many people who lost access to painkillers are still addicted. Some who no longer obtain painkillers, so we know they turn to street drugs that can't get a script from their doctor. And we've heard that a million times. All right. That doesn't mean cracking down on painkillers is a mistake. It appeared to slow the rise in painkiller deaths, and it may have prevented doctors from prescribing the drugs to new generations of people with drug use disorders. Now, listen to this. This is what I found interesting, but a likely solution is to get opioid users into treatment. But listen to how many they got into treatment in 2016. According to a 2016 report by the Surgeon General, just 10% of Americans with a drug use disorder obtain specialty treatment. So the other 90% remained out here running around on drugs. And remember, only 50 to 90% of the time they are successful in kicking the habit. 50 to 90% of the time after treatment, they go back to the drug within the first week after finishing rehab. So it might be 10% that went through the treatment, but I bet you that number is very small as far as how many actually stayed off the drug after treatment, because most of them go right back to the drug. So treatment is really not effective in America. They have to really want to be off of the drug and go back to living a normal life. And that is extremely difficult. Okay, so difficult that the average drug addict does not achieve it. So federal and state officials have pushed for more treatment funding, including medication assisted treatment like methadone. Okay, well, some states such as Louisiana and Indiana have taken a tough on crime approach that focuses on incarcerating drug traffickers. But the incarceration approach has been around for decades, and it hasn't stopped the massive drug plague like the current crisis. So please don't come back with the black on black crime and post that. You guys don't see it, but I do when I go through the messages to approve them. They always got something in there either pertaining to niggers and this and that. And niggers are not the problem in America, okay? The problem is the Caucasoid community and your drug addiction. That is the biggest problem in America. It's not black on black crime. It's not anything black people are doing, in fact. It is a Caucasoid American problem, and it is the biggest problem on earth. You just want me to talk about black on black crime so you can feel all good and fuzzy on the inside, and I'm not going to do it because that's not the leading problem in America, nor has it ever been the biggest problem in America. So I don't care how much you keep trying to talk about it. And your Nazi media keep trying to talk about it too, because I dismiss both of you. So if you are interested in black on black crime, then you need to seek out a coon on YouTube and go sit yourself at their channel and listen to them. But I have a certain agenda on my channel, and that agenda does not include black on black crime. And if I did want to talk about black on black crime, I will talk about that to black people only, not you. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. Hey, I want to thank our queen, the Radical Home Goddess, for this article. And I just want to say, you know, at one point in time, New Jersey had one of the lowest rates for drug overdoses in the country. Not anymore. The state has definitely caught up, and drug overdoses are actually exploding in New Jersey. And doctors, just like everywhere else, have gone overboard, over-prescribing to the Caucasoid community and under-prescribing to everyone else, you know, with that, oh, you don't feel pain like we do stuff. But I want to take the time and thank the doctors out here for being racist and believe in that, because you spared the black community this drug addiction. Doctors raked in cash to push fentanyl as New Jersey death rate exploded. The most powerful opioid ever mass marketed was designed to ease cancer patients into death. It's ideal for that. The drug is fast-acting, powerful enough to tame pain that other opioids can't, and comes in a variety of easy delivery methods, from patches to lollipops. But a dose the size of a grain of sand can kill you. Meet fentanyl. It's heroin on steroids. It's killing people in droves. And in New Jersey, you can get it after having your tonsils removed. In fact, doctors who treat children's colds and adult sore knees are prescribing it with alarming frequency, far more than oncologists easing end-of-life cancer pain. The surge is stoked by companies that shell out hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to doctors, whining and dining them in hopes of convincing them that their particular brand of fentanyl is the solution to all their patients' pain problems. Eventually, it's working. An advanced media analysis found that 8 medical specialties in New Jersey have filed more Medicare claims for fentanyl than those by oncologists. Family practitioners, for example, filed at least 5 times as many claims for fentanyl from 2013 to 2015 than did cancer doctors. There are some powerful drivers of opioid prescriptions that have little to do with the presence of pain in the population, said Dr. Caleb Alexander, co-director of the Center for Drug Safety and Effectiveness at Johns Hopkins University. The investigation also reveals from 2013 to 2015, doctors in New Jersey were paid at least $1.67 million by pharmaceutical companies marketing various forms of fentanyl. In the same time period, fentanyl deaths in New Jersey increased from 42 in 2013 to 417 in 2015. Wow, that's a hell of a jump in just 2 years. Since late 2011, enough fentanyl has been dispensed to allow every person who has died of cancer in New Jersey to fill a prescription for the drug 8 times. Doctors are being disciplined for improperly prescribing fentanyl, in several cases losing their licenses after patients die while taking the drug. So I know doctors are now, because I'm reading the articles, even recently in the paper, are now trying to cut back on prescribing so many opioids and fentanyls. But you still have doctors out here that are still prescribing it heavily because they don't want to lose that money from the pharmaceutical company. See, they become spoiled on the cash that they get from the pharmaceutical companies. Data and documents show a system where pharmaceutical companies and doctors remain in a cozy and ethically dubious relationship. At best, it's a system where cash and prescriptions go hand in hand. And it's a system where time and again, patients suffer and even die when something goes wrong, an occurrence that is far from rare. So, no matter how much they try to cut back, many of these doctors, they're going to continue to do it and even risk losing their license because they want the money. So listen, this is a doctor that received $95,000 bonuses, okay, that he got for treating his patients. So no, they don't want to give up that money. And a lot of times they get like free dinners for their whole family and all kinds of perks from these pharmaceutical companies. I mean, if you're used to getting that for years and years and years, then you don't want to give that up. And it talks about, Perlman, who's one of the doctors, one of 6 in NSYS patients arrested late in 2016 for allegedly running a cash for prescription scheme that paid off and bullied doctors into improperly prescribing Subsys, one of the most powerful and addictive drugs on the market today. So it's a problem. I just don't know how they're going to resolve this whole plague that's going on. It just seems like as we get into reading more and more of these articles, there's no end in sight. I mean, what do? Do you just stop prescribing drugs altogether? You can't do that. Number 2, people have designed all kinds of crafty ways in getting drugs into the country. So that's difficult to stop. I just don't see them ending this whole thing. And it's already the number one way people die in the US now is from drug overdose. So I'm going to leave the link to this article in the description box. So, you'll be able to come out and read it. It's quite lengthy, but it's definitely worth reading. Absolutely. So please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. I'm giving you an update on the Ohio councilman that made the suggestion of not responding to drug overdoses after hearing from the same person 3 times, because these addicts, they actually overdose multiple times during the week. So it's not like they have one overdose and then they're good, maybe for the rest of the month. No, some of them have, I did a story where the cops responded to the same person 20 times. Okay, they had 20 overdoses, and hospitals are also saying that they see the same person sometimes every single day because they're overdosing every day. So that's a problem because, you keep seeing people like that. You're going to run out of money in the budget. You're going to run out of Narcan. You're going to run out of any type of money where you can't even do other things for the city because you're spending it all on these drug addicts. So I kind of see his point, And there's a lot of people blasting him. He's getting hate mail across the country from different people. But I think in due time, a lot of people are going to start agreeing with him. Ohio councilman sparks fury after asking if EMS can stop responding to overdoses. One question touched off a firestorm of outrage and turned an obscure Ohio City councilman into the target of anger. Is the city legally required to keep dispatching ambulances to rescue drug addicts who repeatedly overdose on opioids? Councilman Dan Pickard has been blasted as heartless and cruel, and Middletown, Ohio city officials said they have been getting hate mail from across the country ever since he proposed the question during a recent city council meeting. Frustrated by the fact that the city has already spent 10 times the $10,000 it had budgeted for an overdose medication, Narcan, and saying they need to think outside of the box, Pickard asked the council meeting last week whether there was a legal and ethical path that would allow us to legally choose to respond or not to dispatch. In an email to NBC News, Pickard on Friday admitted the people whose opinion he values the most, his constituents, are divided over his proposal. I would say the ones I have heard from are split 50-50, he wrote. Those who agree with him do not want others to know their position, he added. Yesterday I was in court. I heard from 15 attorneys, 11 deputy sheriffs, and 4 judges who went out of their way to support me, but cautioned against using their names publicly. Everyone is afraid they will be attacked like me. But Pickard also bristled at the suggestion he is a heartless bean counter. I am not putting money ahead of the well-being of people, he insisted. The problem is there is no money. City manager Douglas Atkins wrote in a letter published on the city website that Pickard opened that there could be a system to be later considered that would divert overdosing addicts from jail and into community service and treatment. Pickard also made the point that people with cancer don't get free chemo from medics, nor do people having heart attacks get a free bypass in an EMS run. And Pickard suggests slapping a person whose overdoses with a summons to do community service and work off the costs of EMS runs and Narcan. John Smith obviously doesn't care much about his life, but he expending a lot of resources, and we can't afford it, Pickard told the local Journal News. That kind of talk outrage advocates for a humane treatment of drug addicts. Truth Farm, for instance, said it was appalled by Pickard's suggestion. It pains and infuriates us to see how easily you have turned human lives into dollar signs and an impact on your budget, the group wrote. Noting that Pickard is not running for re-election, Truth Farm said that it doesn't erase your responsibility to the people you currently serve. To suggest that you withhold emergency medical response to overdose patients is manslaughter at its best and premeditated murder at worst. Oh my goodness. Oh man. It's just amazing how they'll fight tooth and nail for these addicts because they are cockazoids. I don't recall any of these people being outraged when crack addicts were being thrown into prison. See, this is why it's hard for many people to feel sorry for these heroin addicts. I, for one, I don't feel sorry for them. I really don't. Y'all can keep sugarcoating it and calling it a public health issue and trying to get everybody to be sympathetic towards these addicts. I'm sorry, it's just not there. Faced with such fury, Atkins took the unusual step of going online to explain that Pickard only made an inquiry and no change of policy was voted on. Councilman Pickard's comments went viral. Wow. And we've received hate mail, national news coverage, and overloaded voicemail and email inboxes, he wrote. But Atkins wrote, nothing has changed. We have not considered or adopted any change to our method of responding, to opiate overdose calls, he wrote. We respond and render aid every time. Middletown is a city of approximately 45,000 people, about 90 miles west of Columbus. It has seen a sharp spike in overdoses. So far, this year, Middletown paramedics and police officers have responded to nearly 600 overdoses, 54 of them fatal. The city's fire department confirmed. Last year, there were 532 overdoses and 74 of them resulted in death. Pickard said sooner or later, Middletown is going to face a fiscal reckoning. No, you know what the whole country is. The whole country is. Right now, these heroin addicts and these opioid addicts are like a money pit. It's like you're pouring tons of money into this plague, and there's absolutely no return on that money. So you are literally losing tons of money going out for these people. And remember, everybody in this country have a limited budget every year. They have like a set amount of money they can spend in their budget. If you are running out of money, that's a problem. And there are places, when I was reading a few articles online, they get their fiscal budget in July. And because of the drug plague that's going on, a lot of these states and cities across the country are running out of money by December. I mean, how long are you going to keep doing it? So if you don't want them to get help through the ambulance service, or if you want them to get help, then what's the other alternative? The other alternative would be to put them in jail. But y'all don't want to do that. And it's also written that it costs more money dealing with heroin addicts in jail than any other inmate because they require so much treatment. And even when you get them off, a lot of them are coming in there with all kinds of diseases like hepatitis C. Many of them got AIDS. Many of them have all type of infectious diseases now, hepatitis B, tuberculosis. So you're not only treating them for the drug addiction, you're treating them for any infections they got. And if it's a female and she's pregnant, you got to now treat her and then treat the baby when the baby is born. They said it costs the average prisoner to house in jail about $50,000 a year. Okay. They said it costs the average heroin addict $75,000 or more, depending on their condition. That's outrageous. And they have to treat all of these people while they're in prison. So, it's a fortune, even whether they're in jail or outside of the jail. It is costing the country a complete fortune in trying to accommodate all of these addicts. And they got to take that into consideration. It's going to be a problem everywhere, not just in Ohio. Whether my plan is implemented or not, the city will soon run out of money, he wrote to NBC News. No money for squads, no money for gas, no money for drugs, no money for paramedics, no money for anything, because it will all have been spent on OD cases. As I said before, I believe there's going to be a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon with this man soon enough. It just not enough time has passed yet. There's going to be a lot of people singing a whole different tune out here when they realize how much of their tax dollars are going towards these addicts. A lot of people don't appreciate that now. So I really believe, he's on to something, and I really believe in time you're going to hear people in other states making the same suggestion. Then all people in need of emergency care will suffer, and heart attacks will kill people, car accidents will kill people, and people will die of other injuries. Yeah, because they're draining all the money, and in time, how are you going to pay your cops and your EMTs and your fire? You're not going to be able to pay people. Pickard added that he's open to other ideas and added, our city does not own a money machine. So please, I think he's on to something. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. And personally, I don't want all my money going towards these junkies, my tax dollars. I want, money to go towards other things. You got to have money for education. You got to have money for running your schools. You got all types of things within the community that also requires money. And he's right. You're draining the resources on people that don't even want to get better. They're not trying to get better. They don't want treatment. They're just going to continue to OD over and over, and they don't care. They don't care about anybody but themselves. Please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. 2 days ago, I did a story on a councilman in Ohio that wanted to do a 3 strikes rule for overdose victims because they are going out repeatedly over and over and over to the same people, overdosing all week long. This story takes the entire cake, y'all. Thanks, Craig Jarrett, for sending this story. Police revive same man from an overdose 20 times. Can you imagine using Narcan on the same person 20 times because that's how many times they've overdosed? An Ohio police officer says one man has been revived from an overdose by naloxone 20 times by police. So that's 20 different calls because this person overdosed. But he still disagrees with a city councilman who asks if it's possible for emergency crews to stop responding to drug overdose calls. And these are repeat offenders. So it's not overall all drug overdose calls, just the repeat offenders. An Ohio police officer says one man has been revived with the opioid overdose antidote, naloxone, 20 times by police. But he still disagrees with a city councilman who asks if it's possible for emergency crews to stop responding to drug overdose calls. Dayton Police Major Brian Johns tells the Dayton Daily News, law enforcement took an oath to protect life. Oh my goodness. Really? Well, y'all must have amnesia on them oaths when you're dealing with black folks. but okay. Comparing the situation to a first responder not doing CPR on an obese person because they have poor dietary habits. Middletown City Councilman member Don Pickard said last week arresting people who overdose increases the burden on taxpayers and strain the court system. You know, it's amazing how they react like grabbing one of these junkies and putting them in jail is like kryptonite. That's all they did during the crack epidemic and was happy to do it. But it's almost like a sin for them to even think about jailing these heroin addicts. You know why? Because it will automatically trigger white mass incarceration, and they know it. This is why they are doing everything going above and beyond not to mass incarcerate these heroin addicts, because they will literally be the only ones in jail. They'll be the biggest population there. Everybody else will be small in size. And they're not about to let that happen. They don't want to mass incarcerate caucasoids, but it's happening already. If you remember, I did a story on now white women are outnumbering Black women in arrests, and a lot of it is due to the drug addiction, because they end up committing crimes out of desperation and trying to get their hands on the drug. Pickard is standing by his comments. We need to put a fear about overdosing in Middletown. So there you have it. You got one man that have to be revised up to 20 times by the police because he has overdosed that many times. That is outrageous. Okay, I don't know how any city budget would survive, and I'm sure he's not the only one. They have to go out to multiple times. That's why this councilman is making the suggestion. So you factor in all the other people that are repeat offenders and need Narcan several times in a week. That's outrageous. That is very expensive. And now you're talking about Narcan. The pharmaceuticals are now going up on the price on top of everything else. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comment section, everybody. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. It seems like the newer forms of fentanyl that are being found in the country are so deadly. The Narcan does not even work anymore. Fentanyl found in Georgia resists life-saving naloxone antidote. And that's, believe me, it's not going to just stay in Georgia, it's going to spread. The U.S. opioid plague shows no signs of slowing down, with the demand for the drug creating an entire market of illegal synthetics that are even more dangerous and deadly than heroin. Some are even resistant to emergency opioid antidote drug known as Narcan, naloxone. One Wednesday, officials at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Crime in Cleveland, Georgia, said they have identified 2 new naloxone-resistant strains of fentanyl analogs, crofentanyl and tetrahydrofuran fentanyl, as reported by the Times Free Press. It is unknown how the human body will react to both drugs since they are not intended for human or veterinarian use. The agency said in a press statement, both of the drugs are so potent they can be absorbed through the skin, meaning overdose is likely. You know what? That's all the more reason why I would never want to be a cop, any type of emergency responder around these drug addicts and drug dealers. You are taking your life in your hands. When you go out there, you don't know what they have, You don't know what type of fentanyl has been laced in the drugs. You may not go home, because of dealing with these junkies and drug dealers. According to WTXL, the krill fentanyl has also cropped up in Cooks County, Illinois, where it was said to be the cause of 44 overdose deaths so far this year. According to GBI, krill fentanyl has been on the authorities' watch list for the past few months. In May, the DEA issued a warning on krill fentanyl, which officials says is manufactured overseas. In May, the agency added the synthetic to its Schedule I list of controlled substances, at least temporarily. Officials say the discovery and identification of tetrahydrofuran fentanyl is even more concerning, as the drug isn't currently on the DEA's list of banned substances. In April, lawmakers in Georgia passed legislation banning the sale and possession of krill fentanyl in the state. Currently, tetrahydrofuran fentanyl is not covered under Georgia's law. Fentanyl drugs are a class of powerful synthetic opioids that are 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse. When used legally, these drugs are prescribed by doctors to treat severe pain, especially post-surgery. Fentanyl is sold under prescription names including Actic, Duragesic, and Sublimase. Street names for fentanyl and fentanyl-laced heroin include Apache, China Girl, China White, Dance Fever, Friend, Goodfella, Jackpot, Murder 8, TNT, Tango, and Cash, according to the NIDA. The drugs are relatively easy to purchase on the internet and imported from China. And see, this is why so many people are not going to the Mexican cartels as much, because China will ship this right to your house. So you don't have to run the risk of being caught with drugs in a car or in a truck, or, it comes right to the house. And I don't believe it's a coincidence that dogs cannot detect the drug. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think they have perfected the formula so much that they know how to get it past the drug sniffing dogs. And you got to really think about it. How safe is it to even use a drug sniffing dog these days? Because if the chances are, if they're going to sniff out fentanyl and certain other powdery drugs, they're going to just die. You're really just, technically, you're just killing these dogs. So I don't know. I don't know how beneficial it is to use a drug sniffing dog anymore, especially for heroin bust, or if you're going to bust someone with fentanyl, because you're literally going to just kill the animal. The drugs are relatively easy to purchase online and imported from China. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the death rate from synthetic opioid overdose has increased by nearly 75% from 2014 to 2015. The data includes all synthetics, such as astramidol and fentanyl. Last year, Life Science reported that deaths from fentanyl have doubled in a single year. In 2014, 4,200 people in the U.S. died from overdoses involving fentanyl, compared with 1,905 people in 2013. In short, the rate of fentanyl deaths increased by 6 deaths per 1 million people to 13 deaths per 1 million people during that 1 year period. They are never going to get this thing under control. Never. But see, opium is nothing new to the United States. Many of you, the white people's forefathers, they were junkies too. Don't think for one moment that these nuts on the plantations and these politicians, they were junkies too. They came here with all that opium and all that stuff. So drugs have always been part of the U.S. from the beginning. So it's not shocking that there's a drug epidemic in the very place that had drugs from the beginning. Hey, please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Before we get into this article, I just want to tell you something that I was laughing about yesterday. I had pulled up a few articles on fentanyl, and I looked down in the comment section. Do you know the majority of the Caucasoids in the comment section were saying they think this entire plague is a hoax? It's not really happening. It's a hoax. I said, that's good. That means that you're not going to be paying attention. And by the time you do pay attention, the damage will be already done. The damage is really done now. Okay? Because they sure can't reverse it. But they're sitting around talking about it's a hoax. And it wasn't just one person. It was probably the majority of the people in the comment section saying this. They don't believe this is really happening. They believe it's a hoax. That's fine. It makes it that much sweeter when you fall. This article just came out on Stat News, June 27th, 2017. Stat forecasts opioids could kill nearly 500,000 Americans in the next decade. The rate they're going, I don't know. Do they even have a decade? Opioids could kill nearly 500,000 people across America over the next decade as the crisis of addiction and overdose accelerates. Deaths from opioids have been rising sharply for years, and the drug overdoses already kill more Americans under age 50 than anything else. Stat asks leading public health experts at 10 universities to forecast the arc of the plague over the next decade. The consensus, it will get worse before it gets better. It ain't going to ever get better. There are now nearly 100 deaths a day from opioids, a swath of destruction that runs from Tony, New England suburbs on the farm country of California, from the beach towns of Florida to the Appalachian foothills. And the worst case scenario put forth by stat experts panel, that toll could spike to 250 deaths a day if potent synthetic opioids like fentanyl and carfentanil continues to spread rapidly, and the waits for treatment continues to stretch weeks in hard-hit states like West Virginia and New Hampshire. If that prediction proves accurate, the death toll over the next decade could top 650,000 people. Wow. That's almost as many Americans as will die from breast cancer and prostate cancer during that same time period. Put another way, opioids could kill nearly as many Americans in a decade as HIV/AIDS has killed since the plague began in the early 1980s. The deep cuts to Medicaid now being debated in Congress could add to the desperation by leaving millions of low-income adults without insurance, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Even the more middle-of-the-road forecast suggests that by 2027, the annual U.S. death toll from opioids alone will likely surpass the worst year of gun deaths on record and may top the worst year of AIDS death at the peak of the epidemic in the 1990s. when nearly 50,000 people were dying each year. The death toll across 10 forecasts, nearly 500,000 deaths over the next decade. Beyond the immeasurable pain to families, the overdoses will cost the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars. See, this is why you're hearing about the article that I did before about the lawmaker saying, cut these people off. They're a drag on all of the resources, and they really are. All right, so this is their prediction chart. Wow. Okay. All right, a sort of interactive chart. All right. Okay. In addition to the forecast provided by academics who specialize in epidemics, so what they're talking about is clinical medicine, health economics, and pharmaceutical use stats. Conducted more than 40 interviews with politicians and patient advocates, providers, and payers, doctors, and drug makers. This analysis is also informed by a review of presentations from top Trump administration health officials, including Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, National Institutes of Health Director Francis Collins, and the acting chiefs of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It took us about 30 years to get into this mess. Robert Volek, professor at the University of Colorado, Denver School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences, told Stat, I don't think we're going to get out of it in the next 2 or 3. I don't know what that, I don't think we're going to get out of it in the next 2 or 3. Oh, he's talking about decades. Okay. Woo. Okay. That's pretty bleak. If you think you're going to go a few more decades with this plague, it is not going to be anybody left. It's already so bad that once unthinkable scenes of public overdose are now common. People are dying on public buses and inside of fast food restaurants. They're collapsing unconscious on street corners and in libraries after overdosing on prescription pain pills, heroin, and fentanyl. A customer in Anchorage, Alaska, hit the floor on a subway while trying to order a sandwich. A mom in Lawrence, Massachusetts, sprawled in the toy aisle of the Family Dollar as her little girl screamed at her to wake up. A grandmother in Liverpool, Ohio, slumped in the front seat of an idling car, turning blue, while a toddler in dinosaur pajamas sat in the back seat. There are so many deaths. Some coroners are running out of room for bodies. The recent national statistics count more than 33,000 opioid-related deaths across the U.S. in 2015. Many victims are young, often in their 20s or 30s. Increasingly, many are white. But the plague touches, they said the word plague, y'all, woo! But the plague touches all demographics, farmers and musicians, lawyers and construction workers, stay-at-home moms, and homeless. I told you, they kept saying it was the whites without education, or the ones that had high school or less. But now you see it's clearly across all economic lines. So it's no longer just poor people and deaths of despair. It's hitting even lawyers and construction workers and all that. Okay. Most of the forecasts produced by STAT predict the annual death toll will increase by at least 35% between 2015 and 2027. Under the gravest scenario, it could triple to more than 93,000 deaths per year. Oh my God. These people, they ain't gonna make it, y'all. They are not gonna make it. On this, all experts agree fatal overdoses will not even begin to level off until sometime after 2020, because it will take time to see whether the federal government efforts to boost drug enforcement and push doctors to write fewer prescriptions for opioid pain pills are effective. It ain't going to work. If they can't get the pain pills from the doctor, they're going to go in the streets and get the heroin. We're already seeing that happen now. And plus, what are you going to do with China shipping all the fentanyl over here by mail that can't even be detected by dogs? Okay, they can't detect it at all, even with their best equipment. The worst case scenario is built around the assumption doctors will continue to freely prescribe and that people addicted to opioids will continue to be exposed, perhaps unknowingly, to powerful synthetic compounds like carfentanil and an elephant tranquilizer capable of killing a human with just a couple of grains. Okay. The best case projection has fatal overdose falling below 22,000 a year by 2027, but experts say reaching that level could require a major public investment in evidence-based treatment options and a concerted push among medical providers to control pain with non-narcotic therapies before trying prescription opioids. Right now, the U.S. spends about $36 billion a year on addiction treatment, and just a fraction of those in need are getting better. Many of them don't. The vast majority of them don't. Okay, they can't kick their habit. It is really very difficult for them to do that. By contrast, federal officials estimate that opioid abuse drains nearly $80 billion a year from the American economy because of expenses tied to the health care, criminal justice, and loss of productivity. This is, again, why you're going to hear more and more of these politicians talking about letting these people go. Okay, like I said before, not unless they got a bottomless pit of money that we don't know about. That's a lot of money to go through every year. 80 billion, we're already up to 51 billion a year. So if they're estimating it can go up to 80 billion a year, these people dragging down the economy by that kind of money, whew. Hey, y'all, if we do our boycott on top of that, America's gone. Think of something, black people. Think of something. President Trump, who has vowed to make opioids a priority, has appointed a commission led by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie to explore solutions, but it hasn't yet laid out its idea. And in the meantime, the administration proposed budget would slash most domestic spending, which health advocates call profoundly counterproductive. Are we doing enough of what we think works? Prescription drug monitoring programs, medication-assisted treatment, naloxone, asks Dr. Ronald Burke, Dean of the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health. And Burke said, are we matching the socialite costs with like expenditures in prevention? So, I mean, they're hoping to get the deaths down, but right now I can tell you, I really don't think it happened. It's going to happen because the more a drug addict can't get a hold of the opioid pills, they just won't go out to the street drug. I mean, you're only talking about stopping it at the doctor level. I mean, you're not talking about stopping it at the street level, which is impossible. America has never stopped drugs from coming in. So what if you close it off at the doctor's level? If you still got all the drugs on the street, how is that going to put a dent in anything? I'm just saying. The Stats Analysis Project, many painful years ahead, the roots of the crisis through stretch back generations to the 80s, when pharmaceutical firms first marketed prescription opioids like oxycodone and hydrocodone to treat pain and claimed they carried minimal risk for addiction. Over the years, these companies pushed hard to get pills in patients' hands with strategies that included paying middlemen to circumvent state regulations and allegedly bribing doctors to prescribe opioids. The results are staggering. Opioid prescriptions nearly tripled between 1991 and 2011. It has been abundantly clear in recent years that such prescriptions can be dangerous. From 2005 to 2014, the rate of opioid-related emergency department visits nearly doubled, according to a new report from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Yet, recently in 2015, doctors prescribed prescription painkillers to more than a third of American adults, despite limited upsides for many patients. It's like cigarettes in the 50s. We look back at the way people smoked and promoted cigarettes as laughably backwards. Magazine ads with doctors saying physicians prefer Camels. Dr. Michael Bennett, assistant professor of health policy and management of Harvard University, said, "We have the same thing now. Oxycontin ads in medical journals where doctors say opioids are good for treating pain. They don't have addictive potential. It's possible 20 years from now, we're going to look back, and I cannot believe we promoted these dangerous addictive medications that are only marginal, more effective." Shoot, 20 years from now, you may have a whole new drug out there. They come out with these new drugs all the time. The state of Ohio, among a handful of governments currently suing drug makers, allege that a well-funded marketing scheme led to its residents receiving 3.8 billion opioid pills from 2011 to 2015, fueling human tragedy of epic proportion. Fatal drug overdoses in Ohio have soared by 642%. Wow. Wow. Since the turn of the millennium. Another statistic, the number of privately insured patients diagnosed with opioid dependence increased nearly six-fold in just 5 years, according to data compiled by Amino, a healthcare data analytic company. In 2012, only 241,000 such patients had an opioid dependency diagnosis. By 2016, that number was 1.4 million. And those numbers don't account for the hundreds of thousands more battling addiction while on Medicaid or Medicare, or while uninsured. Wow. The surging death toll affecting growing numbers of white Americans sparked demand for action in ways unseen during past epidemics that disproportionately affected minority populations. Duh, I wonder why. Law enforcement officers started shutting down pain clinics known as pill mills, where doctors accepted cash for painkiller prescriptions. But That only accelerated demand for heroin as pill mill patients had trouble finding treatment to break free from their addiction. Desperate to keep feeding their cravings and avoiding the anguish of withdrawal, people from all walks of life, soccer moms in Vermont, C-suite executives in California, college-bound kids in West Virginia began to shift from prescription pills to heroin, which was more potent and had become far cheaper thanks to heightened drug trafficking into the U.S. by cartels. 2 years ago, heroin deaths surpassed the toll from prescription opioids for a first time this millennium, according to the Washington Post. 30 years ago, the heroin dealers drove through Arkansas on their way to more populous and lucrative markets. Dr. G.R. Richard Smith, professor of psychiatry, medicine, and public health at the University of Arkansas for medicine, medical science, told Stats. That's not the case now. People are switching from legal prescription meds, rightly or wrongly prescribed, to heroin. Yeah, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, they keep talking about stopping the doctors from writing so many scripts, but what they're leaving out is, what about the street drug? If they can access the street drug, how is that going to slow them down? It's not. And they have no incentive of getting off of these drugs when you're coddling them and saying it's a public health issue. If I was an addict and you kept patting me on the head saying it's a public health issue and allowing me to stay on the streets to get the drugs, why should I get off of them? These people are really silly. Let's see what it says towards the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this link in the description box, and you can go out here and access this article and read through it. And it's just going over like certain towns and how many overdoses that they have and 911 dispatches and things like that. So, and we all generally know that, you know, that's the case from my previous articles on opioids. So it's not getting better. So now they're talking about the death tolls are nearly 100 per day. So it's not getting better, y'all. It's getting worse. And to be honest with you, I don't care how much they keep holding back on the scripts. These people are going to find a way to get to some type of alternative drug. It's just going to make fentanyl and the carfentanil more popular. And of course, the heroin. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. And I also want to say thank you for all of you that have become patrons and also given donations on GoFundMe. Your help is deeply appreciated, and you just can't imagine how much I love and appreciate each one of you that have helped out. Peace, family. I want to thank Craig Jarrett for sending this story. And, you know, I kind of knew this was going to happen, and I have spoken about this before, where the addicts are such a strain on the economy, where you may have to let a lot of them go, especially if they keep repeating their overdose over and over, which many of them are. And even the emergency rooms are saying they see the same person overdosing several times in 1 week. You know how much, you can imagine the amount of Narcan they got to use on just that one person. And if they're using fentanyl, that takes even more doses to bring them back. If they can bring them back, because in many cases, they don't even respond to the Narcan and they just go. And if you remember, I did an article saying that it's costing $51 billion just so they can run out here and keep trying to help these people. I mean, you have to think about all the ones that go to rehab and they're using insurance and they fail. So now you're dealing with a situation with them running back out to the drugs. The police, you got to pay the fire department, the EMTs, and they're constantly in and out of these emergency rooms. And you got to think about some of them need a hospital stay. You got to get the coroner's office involved, the medical examiner, the autopsy. And there are some states like West Virginia that do burials for these people. It's a major strain. And then you got to also set funding aside just so you can keep a stockpile of Narcan available. And you're treating the same people over and over and over and over. That is a strain. And they are a public nuisance. They're all over the road causing accidents and deaths. They're running people over. They're killing people on the highway with their cars. It's ridiculous. And drug driving now has long surpassed drunk driving. It's a major strain on the economy. And then you also got to consider the fact many of them don't have jobs because they're junkies. So that's less money going into the economy and they're straining the resources. Ohio lawmakers suggest letting people die if they overdose twice. It's a third strike, no ambulance for you. An Ohio councilman believed that having an opioid addiction should be a death sentence. He wants to create a three strikes policy in which anyone that states Middletown who has overdosed twice before would not receive emergency care because it's costing the city too much. Dan Pickard told the local Journal News, "I want to send a message to the world that you don't want to come to Middletown to overdose because someone might not come with Narcan and save your life. We need to put a fear about overdosing in Middletown." He asked the city to explore the legality of the proposal. This is about as sensible as Trump's opioid commission member and advisor Kellyanne Conway recently commented that the solution to the opioid crisis is will. What will? Your junkies are the weakest people in the world. They don't have no damn will. What is she talking about? And shows just about as much understanding of the disorder. It's because people are getting frustrated and they don't want to spend no more time on these junkies. And I'm telling you, you may think these people sound crazy now. Give it more time. They won't sound so crazy after all. It's going to be a lot of people jumping on this bandwagon. And I could bet there's probably a lot of people thinking that way right now. They just haven't come out publicly yet to say anything. But don't worry, Dan. No one wants to come to your nowhere little town to overdose, even if it's where best-selling hillbilly elegy author J.D. Vance grew up. People who are overdosing there are your neighbors and their friends, families, and loved ones, maybe even your own family members or their friends whom, given your level of compassion, are unlikely to discuss their problems with you. To be honest with you, I wouldn't want no junkie in my face, none of these whining about their problems to me. So, no, don't come whining to me either. Everyone tries to claim that people with addiction are outsiders or transients, But that's not what even a quick read of the Journal News recent cover suggests. And people with addiction are not choosing to overdose repeatedly because they enjoy it. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I read an article where heroin addicts said they love the way the high feels. It has a euphoric feeling like they're in love. They love that feeling. So that is false, what they just said. It's quite a hellish experience to be revived and put into a constant withdrawal, actually. Well, they don't, all drug addicts don't feel that way. Go and say rehab around them. I promise you, they'll cuss you out because they like being high. So I don't know who wrote this, but this author is full of shit. Instead, they're doing it because addiction itself is defined by the National Institute on Drug Abuse and Psychiatry Bible, the DSM, the compulsive drug use that continues despite negative consequences. Well, many of them are, addicted and it's compulsive, but I still say many of them enjoy that high. That's why when they run out of the opioid, they run out there to the heroin because they want to maintain that high. In other words, if fear, punishment, and consequences could stop addiction by definition, the problem wouldn't exist. We've tried for at least the past 100 years to fight a problem defined by its resistance to punish with whatever more punishment, in the same way that people with addiction continually up the dose in hopes that this time maybe they'll be able to feel okay again. Well, you were all into punishing the crack addicts. I don't feel anything for you. It doesn't work because it can't work. People with addiction takes drugs because they are attempting to cope with emotional pain, typically due to childhood trauma, mental illness, oh my goodness, economic and cultural displacement, or frequently all of the above. You see how they got an excuse for everything? When it was the crack addiction, it was no excuse. Every damn body went to jail. No excuse. They didn't want to hear nothing you had to say. Unbelievable. Adding more pain only adds more fuel to the addictive fire. No one would ever say we should stop reviving heart attack or stroke victims because they've kept eating French fries or because they didn't exercise as much as we all know we should. Yeah, but those are diseases. And I realize you classify an addiction as a disease, but see, the only reason why you're doing that is because it's impacting mostly Caucasians. When the addiction was mostly affecting Black people, you were calling it a crime. This is why it's very difficult for a large segment out in the public to feel sorry for you. And many don't. In fact, many of your own people don't feel sorry for you because I've seen it in these videos. They sitting there laughing and chuckling and even sometimes playing around with the addict. No one is suggesting that not treating lung cancer as a way to get people to quit smoking. That's totally different. And not treating people who were speeding when their car crashed. We don't suggest these things because we recognize the humanity of people who overeat and underexercise, people who can't quit smoking, people who speed. No, you didn't recognize the humanity of the crack addict. And even when our mothers had babies that were addicted to crack, you called them crack babies. But I notice your babies, you're not quick to give them a name. We know that they're just like us. No, they're not. I am not like no heroin addict, and they're nothing like me. But until we recognize that, the same thing is true for other kinds of addiction. We're not going to make any real progress in cutting the death toll. No, you're going to have to make a tough decision, whether you got this argument or not. They are a strain on society, and they are not adding anything to society because, like I said, many of them are not working. They can't keep jobs because of their addiction. So, not unless you got a bottomless pit of money, you better come up with a solution or that work. And plus, I think, right now I was reading there's a large turnover in police departments. They can't keep people like they used to. And I'm not going to be surprised if a lot of these jobs, people walk away from them because they're going to get sick of these addicts. Many of them are probably sick of them already. I mean, how much more are you going to keep treating the same people? It costs money when you walk into an emergency room or stay at a hospital because you now have breathing problems because of your overdose. It costs money to call ambulances to get you out to wherever location these addicts are that have overdosed. Even when they die, it costs the coroner and medical examiner offices because autopsies got to be done on all of these people. And you see what's happening with jobs. They can hardly fill positions like they used to because so many of these junkies are failing the drug tests. And those drug tests cost the company. If they're not charging you, it's charging the company for all of those failed drug tests. But tell me what you think. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Okay, I'm bringing this next story to you. A U.S. opioid epidemic hit Staten Island funeral homes hard. Director turns activist. And thank you, Claude Black, for this story. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and do this. When Kevin Moran speaks to young people, he unscrolls about a dozen letter-sized papers taped together and holds them squarely in front of them. And what these are, when he's holding it up, are death certificates of many people that have died from accidental overdose on opioids. So many of these people, and I believe like when they talk about the tainted batch, it's really fentanyl. Fentanyl is the one thing that they mix in to these batches that kill many of these young people. So he's yelling at them, "Don't do it," Moran yells at the audience in one of his talks last year. "I don't want to see you in my funeral home. I'm here for one reason.
The drug
I'm here for one reason, and that's to scare the living crap out of you. If you want to come by the funeral home when I have a drug overdose case, I'll bring you. I'll show you what the person looks like, and I'll show you what the family goes through. And you watch it, and then tell me you want to do it." Unfortunately, I hear where he's going with this, but believe me, even showing a dead body to a junkie is not going to inspire them to get off of drugs. Okay, you can't even get these people into rehab. Do you really think, even if you scare them into looking at dead bodies and looking at the grieving family, they're going to stop? They're not. They're not, ladies and gentlemen. They are so hooked on these drugs that, you know, if they really in their hearts don't want to get off of the drug, even when they hear about other people dying, they're just not going to do it. The toll of the opioid epidemic that has gripped communities across the United States began making itself felt in Staten Island about 3 years ago, when the bodies of people barely old enough to drive or buy a beer began appearing in larger and larger numbers at the St. John Scalia Home for Funerals in this New York City borough, where many residents work in public service. So it was around 2014 is when they start seeing their highest amounts of casualties to the opioid plague that's going on in the country. So he's talking the casualties of opioid addiction at the funeral home began to appear at a rate of 1 every 4 to 6 weeks. Every one of Staten Island's 13 funeral homes had similar experiences. Last year, accidental overdose in Staten Island accounted for the deaths of more than 100 people, a jump of 35% over 2015, according to health officials. Nationwide, 52,404 people died from a drug overdose, up from 47,055 in 2014, according to the Centers for Disease Control. A majority of 63% of the deaths involved in opioids. So, you know, he's just talking about how emotionally he's about it, you know, and he's a parent and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, we saw none of this empathy during the crack epidemic. Never lose sight of that, ladies and gentlemen. We saw none of this. They were glad to throw you in jail and not care that you were struggling with drug addiction, and maybe that had everything to do with you committing a crime in the first place. They didn't want to hear it. But with them, they want to love them, they want to embrace them, they want to get in front of them and give them hand-holding talks and pat them on the head and tell them, oh, you know, you be all right. But nobody did that. I don't remember anybody from the Caucasoid community coming into the Black community to talk us out of doing crack. You were quite fine with the whole thing. Okay? But you now have an issue and you want understanding from everybody else that it's a public health issue. Sorry, but let me go ahead and play this video.
Epidemic is so different than any others. My name is Kevin Moran, and I'm one of the funeral directors here at Scalia Funeral Home in Staten Island. When you have a death of a young child, a teenager, a young adult, and you listen to the talk in the room, it's what they've been deprived of, what they will be missing out on. Parents would be possibly losing the ability to have grandchildren. A father is missing the opportunity to walk his daughter down the aisle, graduations. All those things that make family memories. As we got into 2015, it became much more prevalent. And not only here, but most funeral homes on Staten Island. There is no socioeconomic barrier. You could be the wealthiest kid and the poorest kid, and drugs don't care. Today, the drug user is a person in a suit, is a professional, could be an accountant, could be a lawyer, and the person selling the pills could be your next door neighbor. And that's the scary part. It's the effect of throwing a rock into the water, and it is amazing how many people's lives are impacted and affected by someone using drugs. Drug addiction is a disease like cancer, and you need to treat the disease. The world in 2017 is not designed for parents to bury their children. If you want to see your son or your daughter You're not going to see them at the dining room table. You're not going to be watching television. You're going to go stand on a piece of grass and look at a 3-foot-high piece of granite. That's where you see the job. The very fabric of me is just torn apart when I see these deaths occurring, and most of them can be prevented. They don't have to happen. There are avoidable deaths.
No, he's right. But where were all these funeral directors during the crack epidemic? Did anybody recall all these white funeral directors coming forward and speaking when we were going through it? I don't remember this. And I don't remember seeing anybody except for the police show up for the crack epidemic. Okay. But now they want all of this public awareness to their drug addiction. Well, I don't have anything to give as far as sympathy is concerned, but I feel bad, but not bad enough where I want to reach out to any of these junkies. You know, they watched our crack addicts die and get placed in jail, and we didn't hear not one murmur from the Caucasoid community. In fact, they were applauding the police for putting us in jail. Now you are going through probably one of the most devastating drug plagues that ever hit this country. Don't turn your face to look at Black people for empathy now. I don't have any to give you, and I won't give it. Like Tareen Rain said, I feel nothing. Please leave your comment and subscribe, and if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. It's time for me to do another bank robbery video due to heroin addiction, and I'm just showing you robberies that were published for the month of June. Okay, I'm sure there are a lot more locally that just have not been published online, but as drug addiction grows, the robberies for banks, pharmacies, and even people's homes are going up because of these addicts. And this one comes out of Morristown. I believe this is in New Jersey. And this man robbed a TD Bank. It says right here, a former advertising designer who became addicted to heroin has been charged with robbing TD Bank in Manhattan 5 days before he allegedly held up TD Bank on South Street in Morristown for $688 last week, attorney said Wednesday. And there's a video here. I'm going to go ahead and play the video.
Zachary Zingali, a Morristown resident charged with robbing TD Bank in town on June 16th, has been ordered held in the Morris County Jail while the charges are pending.
I will just note that give an update to the state's filing. The defendant was also charged in New York City with a robbery, it's called robbery in the third degree. I understand it's a Class C felony, also for an alleged bank robbery.
Zingali also must undergo a substance abuse evaluation.
And for today's purposes, you're stipulating that probable cause does exist for the crimes you're charged with. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Zingali, do you have any questions with you?
I do not.
Okay, there you go. You see they are still out here robbing. He looks like such a goofball. And now you have this older guy right here, Virginia man confesses to 2 robberies, freeing innocent man from prison. And look how old this dude is. He's addicted to heroin. All right, it says Christian Amos turned himself in for old bank robberies, which he committed to meet his drug habit, and he got away with. He serves his sentence in Riverside Regional Jail now. All right, so he almost got away with murder. He literally had to confess. He's 63 years old. Wow. 63 years old. And it was another guy in prison named Gary Bush, 67 years old, who they actually pinned the crime on, but he didn't do it. This dude did. Drug addiction. Wow. And I will leave all of these articles in the description box, everybody, so you'll be able to look at them for yourself. And this is 2 men arrested for an Avoca bank robbery. All right. And you can see they're all covered up. And it looks like this robbery took place on the 21st of June. All right, and it says the FBI arrested 2 men early Thursday on charges stemming from a bank robbery that occurred just before 4 p.m. on Wednesday at PNC Bank at 650 Main Street, Avoca. Okay. Avoca, I guess. Douglas A. Sickler Jr., 36, of Hanover Township, and Sean James Kavanaugh, 35, of Wilkesboro. That's over in Pennsylvania. Okay, I know where this is. Were arrested according to the Avoca police. Okay. And it has them listed, when I pulled up robberies and heroin addiction, this one came up. So this is probably why these 2 robbed the bank, the PNC Bank over there in Pennsylvania. Wow. Okay, so here's another one. Prosecutors say police shooting of bank robbery suspect in Old Saybrook was justified. Okay. And this guy went in and robbed the bank. And of course, he got caught by the police SWAT team. And they actually killed him. I believe he got shot in the head. Okay. And this person was also known to be addicted to heroin. Again, I will leave this in the description box. And some of these guys have a long track record. These cops know who they are. Here's another one. This one's out of Kentucky. KSP make arrest in First National Bank robbery. Okay, and this guy looked like he robbed the bank on June 13th in Kentucky. And it says right here, I guess his name is Hupp, Charles A. Hupp. Hupp, 42 years old, was arrested without incident, lodged in the Carter County Detention Center, and charged with the following: robbery in the first degree, theft by unlawful taking of an automobile, so he stole a car, robbery in the second degree, attempted, persistent felony offender, possession of a handgun by a convicted felon, trafficking a controlled substance in the first degree, first offense, less than or equal to 2 milligrams of heroin and methamphetamines, drug paraphernalia, possession of a controlled substance in the second degree, 2 additional counts of being persistent felony offender and bail jumping in the first degree. So here's another junkie robbing a bank. And this last guy, heroin user, faces jail for robbing man and burglarizing homes. So he was breaking into homes. I don't know why they're not showing his face, and they got him in this profile picture. They should be showing his face. A heroin addict faces jailed after he admitted robbing a man and burglarizing 2 homes. See, this is why I'm telling y'all, if you live, I don't mean no harm, but if you live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of caucasoids, you better be locking up every single day and night. Prolific criminal Sean Webb, 35 years old, confessed to a string of offenses between January and May. He remains behind bars until Friday, when a judge has promised him a prison term of note. Homeless Webb appeared via video link in Plymouth Crown Court from Exeter prison, and to admit robbing a man of cash on January 20th. All right. So he pleaded guilty of stealing the money and burglarizing this house, and he had a long battle with heroin. So again, please be careful, ladies and gentlemen, because as they start writing less prescription, they're going to become more desperate. They're not going to just stop at robbing homes and robbing banks. They're going to start snatching people's cash and money, purses, and anything they can get their hands on the streets. All right. So just be careful out there. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Okay, this is an article that comes out of News, Oklahoma, and it was published on June 23rd. This is a Midwest city doctor charged in overdose deaths of 5 patients. You know, there used to be a saying years ago that people would say a person was toe up from the flow up. Well, this woman is definitely that. Woo! Man, she's beat up looking. A Midwest city doctor was charged Friday in the overdose deaths of 5 patients accused in a murder case of unlawful prescribing excessive amounts of drugs to the victims. Reagan Ganaug Nichols, 57, is charged in Oklahoma County District Courts with 5 counts of second-degree murder. Nichols, an osteopathic physician, is accused of prescribing controlled dangerous substance to patients without a legitimate medical need and in quantities and circumstances that disregarded human life. See, this goes back to the video I did a while back talking about how they would overprescribe to Caucasoids and underprescribe to Black people because many of these white physicians believe that Black people don't feel pain like they do, which is laughable. But thank you to all Caucasoid physicians and non-Black physicians that hate Black people. You spared us this plague, and I want to thank you all personally. She has been banned from prescribing drugs since 2015. I appreciate the efforts from everyone who worked as a team to put this case together, Oklahoma's General Attorney Mike Hunter said Friday. The dangers associated with opioid drugs have been well documented, and most doctors follow strict guidelines when prescribing opioids to their patients. Nichols prescribed patients who entrusted their well-being to her horrifyingly excessive amounts of opioid medications. Nichols' blatant disregards for the lives of her patients is unconscionable. If convicted, Nichols face at least 10 years in prison on each of the 5 counts. Really, she didn't do nothing any different than a drug dealer. The charge is the latest example of prosecutors around the country working to deal with the opioid plague. And this is what y'all should be doing instead of trying to go after people over some damn marijuana. Jeff Sessions and Trump are trying to do. Get out of here with that mess. If you want to be effective, you go after all these prescribing doctors over-prescribing to caucasoids. A former Oklahoma City doctor pleaded guilty in 2014 to 8 counts of second-degree murder. Oklahoma County prosecutors alleged that doctor overprescribed pain and anti-anxiety medication to 8 patients. In 2015, a California doctor was convicted in second-degree murder case in the overdose deaths of 3 patients, according to news reports. Last year, a former pain doctor in Florida pleaded guilty in a manslaughter case over 2 overdose deaths, according to news reports. Opioids, the main driver of drug overdose deaths, were involved in more than 33,000 deaths in 2015. And opioid overdoses have quadrupled since 1999, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Some states, including Ohio and Missouri, have recently sued pharmaceutical companies over their roles in the opioid plague. How about taking responsibility? Isn't that what you say to everybody else? But you notice caucasoids don't do that at all. Last month, the state legislature voted to create a new Oklahoma commission on opioid abuse. Hunter will chair the commission. Well, they didn't come out with no commission when the crack epidemic hit the country. They just threw all black people in jail. I've got an opportunity as chief law officer of the state to bring focus to what I think is a nightmarish social and health issue and public safety issue in the state, Hunter told the Oklahoman. When there are cases in which there is clear culpability, in which the evidence supports criminal charges that related to opioid abuse, we're going to work those cases. According to investigators, Nichols prescribed hundreds of pills to each victim. See? Again, proves what I said in the past, overprescribing to caucasoids, underprescribing to black people. But I'm glad she did it to her own people. She killed 5 of her own people. Nichols prescribed extremely large quantities of controlled substances in suspect combinations, including the most abused and sought-after prescription drugs on the street, to numerous patients with very little medical examination. An agent with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Control reported in a court affidavit. So you can see how, these doctors, some of them are still out here trying to prescribe because, see, every time they write a script, they actually get money from the pharmaceutical company for prescribing drugs to their patients. So now that they have to pull back on all the opioid prescriptions, they're losing a lot of money. These doctors are literally losing a lot of money because of that. And some of them, like this Nichols woman, they want to hang on to it. But I'm going to leave the article in the description box and you can come out here and read it for yourself. But she went to jail Friday and she's being held on a $50,000 bond. If she's a doctor, she should be able to easily get out on bond. Okay, Please leave your comments and subscribe, and if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. But this article that is letting us know, because doctors are writing less opioid scripts, it's now sparking more pharmacy robberies among these devils. Okay, they are determined to have their opioid, whether the doctor write that script or not, they don't care. All right. Man, I tell you what, if crack addicts had done that, it would have been a trail of bodies everywhere. This is an AP article, let me see, dated June 23rd, 2017. I'll leave the link to this article in the description box. All right, as the nation opioid plague intensifies, Indiana cracked down on overprescribing doctors in pill mills, catering to people with addiction. The state also took aim at doctor shopping, the practice of visiting multiple physicians to score more painkillers. Only a devil would do that. The measures had an impact, but not what officials hoped for. While making opioid prescriptions harder to get, the crackdown also helped spur a twofold increase in robberies of pharmacies that exacerbated the state's standing as number one in the nation for those crimes. Between 2009 and 2016, Indiana had 651 pharmacy robberies, the most in the U.S., and more than 597 recorded by number two, California, which has 6 times the population. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration record shows the frequent holdups reflect a grim reality. With each regulation or law enforcement tactic, the opioid crisis quickly shifts to evade new obstacles. Dealers and those struggling with addiction adapt, and the plague continues with little interruption. They're always looking for whatever they can get their foothold. And once they do, they're going to take advantage. A deputy of pharmaceutical investigations with the DEA in Arlington, Virginia, pharmacies with law enforcement agencies in Indianapolis, where most of the robberies have occurred, are fighting back. Pharmacy chains have installed time-release safes that won't open for several minutes, forcing robbers to risk by waiting. Signs so far are positive. Robberies in Indianapolis numbered only 8 through early June compared to 55 for all of 2016. But some criminals responded to those efforts by traveling from Indianapolis to small suburban towns to rob pharmacies, including one in January in Elwood, about 40 miles from Indianapolis, where 2 robbers herded frantic employees into the bathroom after threatening them with a handgun. And that's another thing. Those heroin addicts, they sure enough all know they got a handgun, and they go in there and put that gun in everybody's face up in that pharmacy. Indiana economic makeup has made it a likely breeding ground for opioid addiction for years. The 2008 financial crisis hit the state manufacturing economy hard, causing waves of layoffs. The physically demanding job in heavy industry have long left workers prone to injuries that could lead to prescriptions for painkillers. They get a legit medical prescription, and then all of a sudden it gets out of control, said Jason Huckleberry, an Emory Hospital professor of health policies who has studied opioid addiction. He said the state already had outsized opioid woes related in part of its location along Interstate 65 through 70 and two major corridors for illicit drugs. Opioid addiction was behind the state's worst ever HIV outbreak in 2015, a plague that infected more than 200 people in rural country North Louisville, Kentucky. The most had shared needles while injecting a prescription painkiller. That year, Indiana ranked 17th in the nation in heroin and prescription opioid deaths, with 1,245 deaths per 100,000 people. 4 years ago, the legislature directed the state's medical license board to draft rules requiring patients to visit their doctors periodically to keep their prescription refills. The changes included requiring doctors to use online database to check patients' use of controlled substances. But stemming easy access to opioid probably contributed to the binge of 168 robberies in 2015, more than twice the previous year total, as more people addicted to prescription opioids robbed stores seeking painkillers and other potent drugs, said Greg Zoeller, who was Indiana's Attorney General at the time. So as you can see, as they're pulling back on writing scripts, it's just causing people to rob the pharmacies even more. The holdup, sometimes more than 5 a day in Indianapolis, flooded the black market with nearly 200,000 pills, primarily painkillers. We knew full well that if you reduce easy access, they're going to have these kinds of consequences, Zoella said. Lieutenant Craig McCart, who oversees robberies investigations for Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, said 85% of Indianapolis pharmacy robberies in 2015 were committed by juveniles, enlisted by adult dealers offering cash and gifts to rob stores. Wow, you got the teenagers in there robbing stores. Amid the crime spree, Indianapolis police teamed up with DEA, FBI, and the federal prosecutors for multi-agency approach that led to the indictment of 35 people, including 6 juveniles, in 62 of the robberies. The state's 2 largest drugstore operators, Walgreens and CVS, have also installed time-release safes at their roughly 180 Minneapolis pharmacies and added armed guards at some stores in recent years. Indianapolis pharmacy robberies dropped to 78 in 2016, but the state still ranks second in the U.S. behind California. The latest efforts targeting the robberies is a law taking effect in July that will lead to longer sentences for people who threaten violence or injure anyone during pharmacy robberies. Ken Fagerman, a former South Bend pharmacist who wrote a book about the robberies, said the pharmacy industry should not have tolerated the heist for years and shares some blame. No, they tolerated it because these were mainly Caucasoids doing these robberies. Oh, you see that? The stores don't mind getting robbed as long as it's a bunch of white people doing it. Unbelievable. It's regrettable that more wasn't done sooner, he said. All right. So that's Indianapolis. The pharmacy robberies are going through the roof. right, please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can support this channel, please do. Peace, family. I have another story where an officer got exposed to a fentanyl drug and had to be taken to a hospital. This is starting to become commonplace because of the plague that's going on in the country. Fostoria cop treated after exposure to fentanyl drug, and this is in the Courier. And this story just came out June 23rd, 2017. A Fostoria police officer was accidentally exposed to the opioid fentanyl during an arrest Thursday afternoon, is recovering at home after being treated at a hospital. The patrolman came in contact with what is believed to be the powerful pain medication during a routine traffic stop near the intersection of West Lyle and South Main Streets in Fostoria. Fostoria Police Chief Keith Loreno said the officer pulled over 27-year-old Logan T. Parrish of Fenley about 5 p.m., and the officer discovered a large quantity of what is believed was fentanyl in the vehicle. The officer, who Loreno declined to name Thursday night, put on gloves before searching both the vehicle and the suspect. But during the search of the vehicle, the officer came in contact with the drug and began to exhibit symptoms of exposure. A second patrolman on the scene immediately called for Fostoria Fire Division EMS squad, which arrived minutes later and transported him to ProMedica Fostoria County Hospital for emergency evaluation. Paramedics gave the officer a dose of Narcan, an FDA-approved nasal spray that can reverse the effects of opioid exposure. The officer was treated by physicians and released several hours later. I can tell you the range of emotions I felt getting the call when we had an officer down as a result of this. I am extremely thankful he is home and recovering, Loreno said Thursday night. This just shows that we cannot be tolerant of those criminals contaminating our community with these poisons. Police cannot confirm the substance discovered inside the car was fentanyl until the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation completes a lab analysis. However, Loreno said Parrish admitted that what it was. So apparently the guy that he had been transporting that in his car. So he just confirmed it. Fentanyl has played a large part in the deadly opioid plague. In an effort to deliver a longer, more powerful high, drug dealers often lace heroin with fentanyl. Since the drug can be produced and distributed in mass quantities, fentanyl has evolved into a cheaper alternative to heroin. According to the Drug Enforcement Agency, fentanyl is 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin and 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. The drug can potentially be lethal, even in small amounts. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports that Ohio experienced a 107.3% increase in overdose deaths related to synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl, between 2014 and 2015. The number of fentanyl-related overdoses in Ohio more than doubled from 503 in 2014 and 1,155 in 2015, according to the Department of Health. In fact, unintentional drug overdoses were the leading cause of injury-related deaths in Ohio in 2015, ahead of motor vehicle crashes. If it hadn't been for those two officers, there may have been a death a lot of dead people in the area right now if Parrish was able to distribute it, Loreno said. I can't tell you how proud I am of the officers, whatever. Thursday incident serves as a reminder of the struggle police department, large and small, face as a result of the nation's soaring drug plague, with Fostoria Police Division already well below its staffing level. So I'm telling you guys, the understaffing of cops is nationwide, but they sure still know how to find their way to us to shoot, right? Loreno said there's a need for more officers on the road. It is as crucial now as it has been. And that's all he's just talking about. The Parrish was charged with felonious drug possession, but additional charges are pending. He is being held in the Seneca County Jail until his court appearance. So I believe this place is in Ohio, which is really having a terrible epidemic problem alone in that state, probably higher than anywhere else. But as you see, more cops are being exposed to the drug and overdosing just from searching cars and searching suspects. Oh well, but like I said, my prediction still stands. I believe many of these cops in the future are going to resign. It's not going to be because they're dealing with us, the Black community. It's going to be because of these drug addicts and all the risk of being around the drug. Please leave your comment and subscribe, and if you can, donate to this channel. Peace, family. Okay, this is a new article that just came out in Mother Jones on the 20th of June, 2017. People addicted to opioids are 9 times more likely to have hepatitis C and other many illnesses too. More reason to stay away from these junkies. Americans diagnosed with opioid addiction are far more likely to suffer from a host of other health conditions, from hepatitis C to alcoholism to back pain. That's according to a new report from Amino, a health tech company that matches patients with doctors. The company examined health insurance claims of more than 300 million patients with private health care insurance between 2014 and 2016, and compared with diagnosis from those with opioid use disorder to the general population. And as you can see on this chart, the leading disease a lot of these heroin users now have is your hepatitis C, and next, chronic pain, alcoholism, suicidal. Wow. Ideation, binge drinking, bipolar disorder, failed back syndrome. Okay, that seems to be something associated with back surgeries. Inflammatory back condition, pre-existing. Wow. These people are, oh, wow. Well, what do you expect? The drug is tearing down your body. I mean, nothing good can come of that when you have so many people doing the drug. I mean, seriously, what do you expect? As the chart above shows, addiction to opioids, including painkillers, heroin, and fentanyl, is seldom the only mental or behavioral health issue at hand. Those with opioid disorder are 8.4 times more likely to suffer from alcoholism, 6.9 times more likely to experience suicidal ideation. Wow. Well, what? They're not doing nothing with their lives but being high. Oh, wow. 4.2 times more likely to have post-traumatic stress disorder compared to the general population. The study didn't examine whether opioid addiction was caused by or caused the other diagnosis, but some of the conditions like hepatitis C are often a result of the needle sharing that can come with opioid use. More and more Americans inject opioids, particularly heroin, and hepatitis C rates have soared. The number of new infections tripled between 2010 and 2015, according to a recent report from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Other diagnoses like chronic pain and failed back syndrome or pain after back surgery could be the reason the patients got started taking opioids to begin with. For years, opioid painkillers were aggressively marketed and liberally prescribed to those with chronic pain, but there's a slant evidence that the painkillers work when prescriptions for long periods of time, when prescribed for long periods of time. According to the CDC opioid prescribing guidelines released last spring, opioids should be prescribed for chronic pain only after other solutions like amphetamines, I guess Tylenol, and physical therapy have been considered. So, another reason to stay away from these junkies. Hepatitis C is soaring among them, and they're going to share needles because, as you know, people are going to pull back on helping these junkies out here as these diseases spread. So I'm just letting you know, as a precaution, just stay clear from these people. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can, donate to this channel. Peace, family.